begin our journey through 1st and 2nd Samuel, it's good to remind ourselves that these narratives are situated in a particular context. From the closing words of the book of Judges, we know that the Israelites are both leaderless and disconnected from God. The book ends, "In those days there was no king in Israel. All the people did what was right in their own eyes." Well, 1 Samuel begins with a salvation story. New life comes out of barrenness. Faith rises from hopelessness. Despair is transformed into thanksgiving and praise. The narrative opens by bringing us into the lives of a Hebrew family in the mountains of Ephraim. Through it, we are introduced to a man, Elkanah, and one of his two wives, Peninnah. And we quickly begin to see in these opening verses, though, that they are not the focus. Instead, it is Elkanah's other wife, Hannah, who seems to be the central figure in this unfolding story. Hannah's barrenness and Peninnah's derision of her has driven Hannah to the house of God.
Barrenness. That's the backdrop of the opening chapter of Samuel. That's the context that God Himself has highlighted for all to see, barrenness. How often do we remember when we think about the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that all these men had a wife who was unable to conceive? And in each case, we are told that God was the one who opened the womb of Sarah and of Rebekah and of Rachel. The backdrop of barrenness is important because at its core is our absolute inability to change things. I mean, there are so many areas of our lives in which we are unable to change things. And when this happens, when our weakness and desperation are so obvious, God is given a backdrop that allows His power to be displayed without distraction and without dispute. Against the backdrop of barrenness, it is crystal clear that God is the only one who can bless.
And that's not usually our perspective on barrenness, is it? Especially when the backdrop of barrenness comes down onto the stage of our own lives. Now, literal barrenness may have to do with infertility, but all of us have experienced some form of figurative barrenness, which I would describe simply as a profound lessness. Of course, the lessness there means that you fill in the blank. What's the lessness in your life? We all encounter places where the life and blessing of God feels galaxies away. Now, Hannah took her problem to the Lord in prayer. She poured out her heart to God. She acknowledged her weakness, dependence upon Him. She prayed boldly, even making a vow before the Lord. But a word of caution here. It certainly appears that Hannah bargains with God and gets her way. If He blesses her with a child, in return, the child will be dedicated to the Lord's service. Well, bargaining with God and making vows can easily lead us into emotional and spiritual doldrums. You see, our relationship with God is not one based upon bargaining or quid pro quo action.
The point is that in her distress, Hannah, in her humility, runs to God. She prayed and prayed until, through the words of Eli, she came to a place of faith and peace, a real belief that God would take care of her. She connected with God and was able to leave her burden with Him and then move forward. And you see, in our times of barrenness, our barrenness of spirit, we too have a compassionate God who invites us to seek Him. The Lord, He most certainly takes care of us, not necessarily in the manner we prefer or desire. That's true. But He works things together for our good, even when we might not understand. Something we can certainly glean from Hannah's answered prayer is the graceful response of returning blessing for blessing. What I mean by that is, as we receive God's grace, our response by offering blessing to others provides a witness to the world of God's goodness and love.
And so, the birth of Samuel sets the stage for the unfolding drama of kingship and kingdom. This kingdom is to shine out before the nations as a testimony of God's character. Samuel the prophet will help guide the nation of Israel in their quest and desire for a king. He will play a central role in God's interaction with Israel, providing guidance and wisdom as God's witness before these leaders.
Humility, vulnerability, and the unwavering faithfulness of God fill the opening verses of 1 Samuel. You have been invited into this amazing story which touches upon similar desires and situations found in our own lives. And what we will see in this story is that God will find possibilities for new life and hopeful futures in persons and circumstances that seem impossible by human standards.
Well, thank you for joining us for our first week together. And we encourage you to continue your reading through 1 Samuel. And next week, we'll explore chapter 3, the call of Samuel.